Hi everyone! In the previous sections, we have learned about the definition and basic strategies to develop motivation. Before moving to the main part of this section, I would like you to listen to a student sharing 5 ways to increase his or her motivation when learning a foreign language.
Here are 5 ways to keep your interest high and increase your motivation to learn English. Let's get started. Number 1. Set aside time every day to practice your English. Dedicate some time to learning English every day, at least 10 minutes. 10 minutes each day will produce better long-term results than a full day on the weekend and then nothing for 2 weeks. Practice English every day until it becomes a habit. Number 2. Find someone to encourage and help you practice learning English. Someone who is around the same skill level as you. Set up a regular weekly meeting and speak only English. Go to the cafe and have conversations or watch movies together. Number 3. Find fun and interesting ways to learn English. Do you like singing? Talk and sing to yourself in English. Do you like reading short stories? Challenge yourself to read at least 10 pages every day. Find your own way. Number 4. Use English as much as you can. Speak English every day. Choose a subject and write about it. Write short stories or write about yourself. And if you are too tired to actively practice, just relax and listen to a story in English. Watch a movie or listen to English radio stations and podcasts. Number 5. Join a group to practice your English. There are so many groups on social media for learning English. Find a place where you can have contact with other English speakers. Engage in a conversation on Facebook with friends who post in English. This will motivate you to continue learning and keep moving forward.
Have your students applied any of these ways? If not, I strongly recommend that you encourage them to try at least 2 among these to improve their engagement with the language. That's the student's part. What about the role of the teacher in maintaining and protecting students' motivation? Happily, the spectrum of motivation maintenance strategies is particularly rich, since ongoing human behavior can be modified in so many different ways, ranging from the manner we present and administer tasks to teaching the learners how to motivate themselves. In today's section, I will introduce to you some ways to maintain and protect motivation by creating a stimulating and enjoyable learning environment, including breaking the monotony of learning, making the task more interesting, and increasing student involvement. People are usually quite willing to spend a great deal of time thinking and learning while pursuing activities they enjoy. Just think of all the hours we devote to, say, doing crosswords, rehearsing for amateur theatre performances, or playing computer games. These examples suggest that learning does not necessarily have to be a boring and tedious choice, which it very often is. If we could somehow make the learning process more stimulating and enjoyable, that would greatly contribute to sustained learner involvement. This is an assumption that most motivational psychologists subscribe to, and which also makes a lot of sense to classroom teachers. Indeed, many practitioners would simply equate the adjective motivating with interesting. However, the issue is that it is very difficult to make learning interesting. There are several reasons. Many teachers and also students share the belief that serious learning is supposed to be hard work, and if it is enjoyable, it is doubtful that it is serious or significant. with increasing pressures on teachers to cover the curriculum and to prepare students for tests and exams, their emphasis inevitably shifts from the process, the extent of learner involvement and enjoyment, to the product, that is, to produce fast and tangible outcomes. Not all assignments can be fully engaging. We have to teach the whole curriculum, and certain parts are bound to be less attractive for the students than others. We, teachers, are not in the entertainment business and cannot be expected to turn everything into fun. Finally, school learning includes a lot of seat work. This is in spite of the fact that, as already mentioned, most school learners are in the most active phase of their physical development and find it extremely difficult to spend most of the working time practically motionless. This has been the bad news. The good news is that there is an impressive array of motivational strategies that have been found to be effective in living up to classroom learning. This suggests that within what is feasible, we might be able to find an angle for making learning more stimulating in many, if not most, situations. Broadly speaking, we can pursue three main types of strategy: breaking the monotony of learning, making the task more interesting, and increasing the involvement of the students. Of course, the three stimulation goals overlap. What breaks the monotony of learning will also make the process more interesting, and what is interesting may encourage further student involvement. It is a matter of fact that even in classes characterized by a mixture of interesting teaching approaches, there is a danger that as the school year progresses, both teachers and students can easily settle into familiar routines. The routines then can easily turn into a monotonous daily grind, which the class losing its edge. Monotony is inversely related to variety. In order to break monotony, we need to vary as many aspects of the learning process as possible. First and foremost are the language tasks. For example, we can vary the linguistic focus of the task, such as a grammar task can be followed by one focusing on social-cultural issues. The main language skills the task activate. For example, a writing task can be followed by a speaking activity. The channel of communication, varying auditory, visual, and tactile modes of dealing with learning, selectively using visual aids, and the organizational format. For example, a whole class task can be followed by group work or pair work. Variety, however, is not confined to tasks alone. It can also concern other aspects of the teaching learning process, such as our presentation style, the learning material, the extent of student involvement. For example, occasionally students lead some of the activities, and classroom spatial organization, for example, how the table and chairs are arranged. The final aspect of how to break the monotony of the classroom teaching concerns the general rhythm and sequence of events. Although various teaching events in a class are traditionally based on the logical flow of information, from a motivational perspective, the flow is just as important. For example, it may be worth starting the class with a warm-up, which can be a short, stimulating game to set the tone, or a slow section of the lesson that requires contemplation can be followed by a break involving some sort of movement or a fast sequence of events requiring different kinds of concentration, such as a short game. Of course, it is not suggested that instructor should systematically and continuously vary all the above aspects of their teaching. Rather, we may look at these variables as cooking ingredients, and all we need to make sure is that We don't serve exactly the same meal every day. And to top it off, we may want from time to time to do the unexpected. An occasional departure from what the students have come to expect can cause the final surge in the motivational flow. The second aspect of motivating students is to making the task more interesting. Varying the task is important, but not even the richest variety will motivate if the content of the task is not attractive to the student. That is, if the task is boring. The literature contains an abundance of suggestions on how to make tasks interesting. The trouble is that, in real life, most of the tasks we use are prescribed by the official course syllabus or coursebook, and teachers usually have little time to introduce new activities. What are the most motivating features of task content? Here are some ideas. Challenge. Humans like to be challenged, as evidenced by our continuous fascination with crosswords, puzzles, or computer games. And the same applies to taking risks if those are moderate. This means that tasks in which learners need to solve problems, discover something, overcome obstacles, avoid traps, find hidden information are always welcome. Next, the content must be interesting. A simple but effective way to raise task interest is to connect the topic with things that students already find interesting or hold in esteem. For example, including prominent events or people from the youth culture can add an attractive dimension to the activity. Learning about, say, daily routine can become much more interesting by focusing on a famous pop star trying to imagine what he or she does and does not do. Next is the novelty element. If something about the activity is new or different or unfamiliar or totally unexpected, this will certainly help to eliminate boredom. The intriguing element. Tasks which concern ambiguous, problematic, controversial, contradictory, stimulate curiosity by creating a conceptual conflict that needs to be resolved. The exotic element. We all like learning about places and people which are unique and have a certain amount of grandeur. The fantasy element. Tasks are inherently captivating if they engage the learner's fantasy. Everybody, children and adults alike, enjoy using their imagination while creating make-believe stories, identifying with fictional characters, or acting out pretend play. The next is personal element. There is something inherently interesting about learning about everyday life of real people. It has been capitalized on by TV soap operas, and their generally high viewing rates prove that the principle works. In a similar vein, many coursebook tasks can be made stimulating by personalizing them, that is, by relating the content to the learner's own lives. Competition. The opportunity to compete can add excitement to learning tasks, regardless of whether the competition is for prizes such as a packet of sweets or merely for the satisfaction of winning. Tangible outcome. Tasks which require learners to create something of a finished product as the outcome, such as students' newsletter, a poster, a radio program, an information brochure, or a piece of artwork, can engage students to an unprecedented extent. And humor. A little humor will make students find learning fun and interesting. Lastly, we will have to increase students' involvement. People usually enjoy a task if they play an essential part in it. This is well illustrated by class discussions, which are usually perceived to be interesting by those who have contributed to it and boring by those who have not. This means that another way of making learning stimulating and enjoyable is creating learning situations where learners are required to become active participants. Sometimes, learners need a more direct nudge than merely presenting an opportunity towards participation and handing out specific roles such as on cards, or giving them personalized assignments are necessary to provide the needed momentum. So far, we have dealt with some strategies to maintain motivation by creating an enjoyable learning environment. I hope that you will find those strategies useful and apply some of them to facilitate your teaching. Thank you.